Hey, my guest on this episode of Unbeatable is Colby Smith. Imagine that you just accepted a position to a very exclusive school, and when you've already said yes, you get a phone call saying that your dream job has just become available. What do? Well, that's exactly where Colby found himself when he got recruited to play baseball at West Point in the United States. But his entire childhood, he just wanted to play professional baseball. And right after saying yes to West Point, he gets a phone call from the New York Yankees saying we're interested. You're going to find out what Colby does next in this episode of Unbeatable.
These stories of triumph over adversity will help you handle your toughest days in life. You're listening to Unbeatable with Jeff Struker.
Colby, thank you so much for joining me today, man.
I'm super happy to be here. Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, it's an honor.
Yeah, well, you and I have a mutual friend. We've never really met in person, but a big shout out to Sam for connecting us online and making this interview possible.
Yeah, shout out to Sam. Yeah, Sam was the chaplain at my last unit in the military, and we got to be good buddies. And yeah, he had just so much amazing things to say about you, Jeff, and he's made me into a fan, one of your many fans. So.
Well, that's funny because he said the same thing about you, and he was like, Jeff, you really got to talk to this guy. And he and I connected a bunch of times together in your previous unit, but I guess you and I just never had a chance to meet each other face to face, right?
I don't think so. Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about what you're doing now in just a moment, but I want to go back and do some backstory. For those of you who are listening and you don't recognize the name Colby Smith, he spent some time in the U.S. Army before leaving, going to business school and helping to start a business. And Colby, I just want to ask, like, why, what prompted you to join the Army? What was the motivation there?
Yeah, it's funny, there's so many unique stories about how people enter into the service.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, listen to part of your Liberty convocation, and my story is way less deliberate than your decision to join the military. I kind of stumbled into it, to be honest. So growing up, my dad was a baseball scout. My mom was a school teacher. So sports and academics were super, super important to us. The third, I guess, like pillar, if you want to call them those, when I was growing up in our family, was faith. I was, fortunate enough to grow up in a family that took us to church, and they didn't like ram it down our throats. But as I got older, became a Christian, and that made a huge difference in my life as well. So that continued through high school. I made the decision I wanted to play Division I baseball at the best academic school that I could get into, and that recruiting process as a high school athlete who wants to play D1 sports is kind of weird.
Yeah,
you don't have a whole lot of like control over the process. It's very like luck and like timing dependent. You have to like play at the right showcase in front of the right schools, and the stars have to align type of thing. And just so happened that the two like good academic schools that recruited me the most were the U.S. Air Force Academy and West Point. And that was like totally weird for me because I had zero connection to the military at that point, zero family. I didn't know anyone who had served. So I was like, like, God, what is this about? Like there's like a clear message here that you're drawing me towards service, even though that wasn't something that I had in my plans. I planned on trying to play pro baseball. That was my goal.
Yeah.
So, ended up talking to a bunch of people who gave me good advice, and they were like, hey, if you get into one of those schools, like you gotta do it.
Yeah. You got to jump on those opportunities, man.
Right. So, ended up deciding to go the West Point route. Honestly, like I'm still not sure why. I think it was just based on what I'd seen in movies and stuff. I thought the Army jobs looked like more fun than being a pilot for whatever reason. So committed to doing that. And, that decision got more difficult actually after I graduated from high school, right before I reported to West Point, because I got drafted by the New York Yankees. So at that
hold
point,
on, had you already committed to West Point before you got drafted by the Yankees?
Right. So
wow,
I was just
man, one of the most storied and well-respected baseball programs in history says we want you, but you've already said yes to the United States Military Academy in West Point. Man, that must have been a rough decision for you.
It was. It was, especially given that, like I said, I had no aspirations to serve in the military, but had like huge aspirations to play pro baseball. And here I get like given the chance to get paid to play the game I love. But ultimately ended up deciding to go the West Point route instead of going to play pro baseball out of high school. Just felt like I'd made a commitment, and I mentally had to overcome so much to be like, okay, I'm ready to give my all to this West Point thing. It was just too late for me to pivot. So at the time too, though, it was sort of like a half commitment, because at the time you could go to West Point, play 4 years of Division I baseball, get drafted again out of the academy and go play right away instead of serving in the Army. So I was like, that sounds like the perfect scenario. Like, I'll go get a great West Point degree and then go play pro baseball like I've always dreamed of, and forget about this Army stuff. So that's sort of like was the plan when I went to West Point.
Yeah, it's the best of both worlds right there, right?
Right.
How much did your mom and dad influence that decision? Because I can only imagine being tugged in the get a chance to play ball for the Yankees, at least make your way through the Yankees program, or go to West Point, become a military officer, and maybe never play pro baseball at all. That's a rough decision to have to make right there, man, especially when you've already given your word.
Right. No, I mean, my parents were huge in that, especially my dad. Again, he was a baseball scout, for my whole childhood with different teams, primarily the Dodgers. But, we spent our summers following him around to minor league baseball stadiums and seeing what that pro ball life is like. So, when I was like, hey, Dad, what do you think I do here? He was like, look, like, that minor league baseball is not the glamorous life people.
You know what it looks like. Right.
Right. And the chances of making it to the big leagues are so slim. He was like, go get a good education. And then, if the door's open still for pro ball down the line, take it.
Yeah.
Very thankful now that he gave me that advice.
I was just thinking, you did get the whole package when you were growing up, though. If you had a mom who was an educator, a dad who was into sports, a dad who had a career in sports, and they both gave you the foundation of faith, man, that's the whole package right there. No wonder why you had some, opportunities in front of you.
Yeah. I mean, incredibly blessed, right? Like, I feel like in a lot of ways I did start on third base, so yeah, it's been critical, and I'm so thankful for it.
So for people that don't understand, the opportunity to get into one of those service academies, the Air Force Academy, the Naval Academy, which were the Marines come out of, or the U.S. Military Academy for the Army, those percentages are extremely low. So when you got a chance to go to school in one of those two, it is a once in a lifetime opportunity. You know that. I know that. I just wanted to make sure the listeners know that. And you went to West Point to play baseball, right?
Right, exactly.
And then I know we just talked about this a few moments ago. What happens to you while you're at West Point to play baseball and eventually hoping to get into the big leagues?
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I had this great plan when I entered West Point, and that fell apart almost immediately. So
plans normally do.
I'm sorry?
I said like plans normally do. Yep.
Exactly. Don't survive first contact, right? Mine did not. Mine crumbled right away. So my first semester at school, my freshman year, plebe year, I'm in boxing class. At West Point, they make you take boxing. And, I throw a right hook at some point and dislocate my shoulder, my throwing arm.
Oh, man.
Yeah. It hurts like heck, but, I keep trying to like grit my teeth and make my way through it. But every day in boxing class, my shoulder's popping out. I'm just in so much pain. I can't throw at all. So I missed my whole freshman baseball season, and ultimately, go get an MRI and find that I tore my labrum and I needed season-ending surgery on my throwing arm.
Oh, dude.
I still was optimistic. I felt like, this season's going down the tubes, but I'm just a freshman. I'll bounce back. I'll rehab. I'll get back to 100%. I'll be a starter. I'll go play pro baseball. Like, it's all going to happen. And that wasn't in the cards. Like, that wasn't God's plan. My shoulder came back to about 60 or 70% strength. So it was like good enough to stay on the team if I wanted to, but not good enough to start. So, and I was a catcher, and as a catcher, it's even more taxing than any other position, because when the pitchers get their work in, the catchers are there catching the bullpens, which just, beats the heck out of your body. And then when they're done, then you start your real practice with the rest of the position players. So it's this massive time commitment and just so physically taxing. And you do that to get on the field and play and compete at the sport you love. And I knew that wasn't going to happen. So I'm asking myself, like, first of all, do I want to stay at West Point? Because pro ball's out the window. So if I stay at West Point, I'm going into the service very much in a time of war. Like, is that what I really want? And then secondly, if I stay, do I want to stay on the baseball team and commit all this time and effort to something where I know I'm not going to play? So that was really, really tough.
And what helped make that decision for you? First, about the baseball team. Secondly, about just sticking around West Point and joining the Army at a time where you virtually know you're going to go to war.
Yeah. For me, at least, for the Army thing, I could not have been, again, more ignorant about the Army when I showed up at West Point. I didn't know the difference between officers and enlisted personnel. And that's like a
little bit of a difference there. Yeah, there's a little bit of a difference there.
Like, I didn't know that's why I was going to academies, to be an officer, like I didn't know the ranks, but I didn't know the difference between a sergeant and a colonel. Like, literally, I could not have been more ignorant. But over my first couple of years at West Point, I started to see, a little bit about what the Army was about. And I liked it. I was like, this, I think, could be a good fit. So I'm going to stick it out here at the academy. And I loved my teammates, and I loved, the team. I really cared about them. So I just, prayed about it a lot, and, it wasn't like a conscious, well thought out decision on my part to stay on the baseball team. I just felt like the Lord was going to, he was calling me to lead in different ways than I'd led before on the team. And I had unfinished business there. Yeah. So,
well, you already got accepted into one of the most difficult schools on the planet. Literally, if you look at the rate of acceptance versus applications just to get into West Point, and you got accepted to play ball. So why did you decide to stick around and play baseball after you had this season-ending and probably career-ending injury right out of the gate first year in school?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It was a God thing. Like, the logical decision would be to stop wasting my time with baseball.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, why'd you keep hanging around the baseball team when you knew that my shoulder's blown?
No, it was a passion thing. I was passionate about my teammates. I love those guys. And like, the thought of not being able to help them be successful on the field was too hard for me. Like, I wanted to help them. I didn't know how I was going to help them, but I felt like God was saying, dude, I have plans for you. Okay. You're gonna find ways to contribute, even if it's not on the field. And that ended up being really true.
How did you end up contributing?
I mean, I was just committed to, like, when I show up every day, I'm gonna have the best attitude I possibly can. I'm gonna have the best work ethic I possibly can. I can't contribute on the field, by through batting or throwing out base runners anymore, but I can contribute by catching bullpens really well. Mentoring the younger catchers, advising the young pitchers, on what they're doing, and just being like the best teammate I possibly could be. So
I hope somebody who's listening to you right now is hearing, okay, life just threw you a hard punch. I'm using your boxing class analogy, and things didn't go the way that you wanted them to go, and you can't control your circumstances. I hope they're hearing this right now, and you're talking about right where they're at. But I also hear them, I hope they hear you saying, you can't control the circumstances, but you can control your reaction and your attitude towards them.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so you stick around the Army. You obviously become an Army officer, and you end up going and serving where?
Sure. Just to wrap that story up. So my teammates, I think, ultimately, just to put a
bow on it. Yeah.
On it. My teammates, I think, saw how committed I was to them, and that I really cared about the team. And they ended up electing me to be their team captain my senior year, despite not playing on the field. So that for me was the validation that I'd done about it the way, was that, at least in my teammates' eyes, they saw me as someone they wanted to represent the team.
Yeah, so that's incredible. The fact that you're not playing, but they recognize this is the heartbeat of the team right there.
Totally. So anyways, so after that, entered the Army. So I branched infantry, made a pit stop down at Fort Benning for about a year. Did infantry officer basic course, Ranger school and airborne school. And then shipped out to Fort Carson, Colorado, married my wife, my high school sweetheart, Sarah, who's just incredible. And deployed almost right away. So I'm, still 22 years old, and found myself in Afghanistan leading troops in combat as an infantry platoon leader, which is something that I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
So
not only in Afghanistan, but this is the heart. This is right in the middle of the big war that's been going on there for a few years. And you're located on the border where a lot of action is at a U.S. Fire base. So talk about what happens when you're leading a platoon of infantry, U.S. Army infantry, in Jalalabad in April of 2012.
Yep, that's right. Yeah. So get there early 2012, take a couple months. We're, getting our feet under us, going out on patrols. The platoon is performing well. We're getting to know each other better, getting more cohesive, and, meeting our Afghan military and police counterparts, and getting to know the locals, and helping them any way we can. And, it's going great, but it's just super, super quiet. It's like eerily quiet. We're not seeing any Taliban activity, no firefights. It's all concentrated kind of in the mountains to the north and south of us. So we're like, man, this is like too easy right now.
Yeah.
And that changed in a hurry.
And I just want to pause for a second. By the way, anybody who's listening and you're hearing this guy's at war and it's really, really quiet. Well, it's one of those eerie quiets, right? Like it's quiet. It's too quiet. Does that mean something bad's about to happen? If in case you just are wondering, why is that a big deal? Go for it, man.
Yeah, I mean, because the reporting is saying that there's all kinds of Taliban presence. They're setting up attacks. They're, building up weapons caches. And we're like, God, this sounds awful, but we're not seeing anything. Well, we ended up finding out on April 15th of 2012 what they were up to. And at the time I was on the base. It was in the morning. I was having kind of a normal, kind of slow day. We'd been out on patrol, I think, the day before. So my platoon was on the base. Fall Finley Shields, which is like just south of Jalalabad airfield for people who've been there. And I'm, by myself in like this little wood building, little bee hut, and I'm typing up a plan for a patrol that we're going to do the following week. And right about, as I'm like in the middle of that, all of a sudden I hear just this huge explosion, massive explosion, loudest thing I've ever heard in my life. And I feel like the building I'm in is about to come down around me. So
literally, because it's just 2x4s and plywood. I know what you're talking about, but for people who don't, you're just talking about 2x4s and plywood hastily nailed together.
Oh yeah, exactly. Maybe some sandbags if you're lucky.
Right.
But so I'm wondering myself, I'm like, I've never heard anything like this. What the heck was that? Like, was that a mortar? But it's like way too loud for a mortar. It must have like hit my building or something, And right about then is when I hear the small arms fire go off, right? People are shooting rifles all around me. And I'm like, oh man, this is going down. Like we're getting attacked right now. So, I rush out of the little building I was in, run to our company command post, find my first sergeant. I'm like, hey, what's going on? And he goes, I don't know. But, the big explosion happened over there where you see that smoke. That's where most of the gunfire is going on. And your platoon is the only combat arms platoon on the base today. So you guys got to go figure it out.
So go fix it.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, this is, again, I haven't been there very long. This is my first firefight. Like I have not done this before. And so I run, get my NCOs and say, hey, look, like it's up to us. We got to go figure this out. So the guys kit up, get their rifles ready, and come up with a hasty plan. And we just kind of take off charging towards the sound of the gunfire over there. And it's over in like a corner of the base, a few hundred meters from where we were. And as we get closer, we're heading towards the sound of the gunfire, but coming away from the blast site are wounded Americans, right? So the units and the people who were over in the area where the attack was initiated, like they just got torn up. And they're getting pulled away, dragging wounded, screaming people past us towards the aid station. And we're like wide-eyed, like, whoa, what the heck are we
like, this is real and it does not look good.
Yeah. Yeah. So heart is just pounding. And, we get over there a little bit closer. And, now I realize that explosion was a vehicle-borne IED. So the Taliban packed like 300 or 400 pounds of homemade explosives in the back of a vehicle, and a suicide bomber drove it up to the perimeter of our base's security fence and detonated himself. So a huge explosion blows down the security fence, like the wall that is keeping good guys in, bad guys out. And on the outside of the base, pre-staged in that area, is a group of Taliban fighters who have concealed themselves using burqas. So
for people who don't know what a burqa is, they're dressed as women in this long robe that flows from head to toe, and they're hiding underneath that in the women's clothing. Go ahead.
Exactly. And vehicle borne IED, bomb goes off, blows open a big hole in our fence. Those fighters rip off their burqas, and you can see their arm to the teeth.
Yeah.
And come charging in the base and just start raising hell. So, I mean, they are, they're kicking in doors, throwing in hand grenades. They're, shooting these wood buildings with RPGs and setting them on fire. Shooting people with their AK-47 assault rifles, just going nuts, right? And by the time we get over there, there's, a bunch of people wounded, but we set up a hasty little perimeter around where the Taliban fighters are in the base, and kind of get them cornered, over kind of near the blast site where they entered the base. So,
hey, I want to pause for just a second and point something out. The listeners just heard, and I always try to tell people this, Colby, when I'm doing an interview, man, warriors are my heroes because of something you just said. And what I try to tell people every time I interview a warrior is just thank you, man. Thank you for being willing to serve your country, fight for our way of life. But I want to make sure that people didn't miss what you said. When you hear the explosion and you start to make your way as a leader, you're running towards the sound of the guns, which itself is contrary to human nature. And as you're on the way to the sound of the guns, where the big fight is, you see Americans coming back from the guns who are already wounded. So in your mind, you have to know, this could get bad for me, right?
Right. Yeah. No, we were totally freaked out, but we knew there was no real alternative, right? It was like it had to be done. So
yeah. I just want to point this out to listeners, like the kind of men and women that serve their country. And I'm talking about wherever you're listening, anywhere around the world, the guys and the gals that serve your country, they deserve a handshake because they are the kind of people that will run to the guns when everybody else is running away. Sorry to interrupt you, man. So tell us what happens when you guys get the Taliban kind of corralled together and you start to make a fight against them.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for your service too, Jeff. I feel kind of silly telling my war stories to you, given, you're just amazing.
No, man, we're here to hear your story, not mine. So go for it, man. What happens next?
All right, so we've set up this little perimeter and we know where the Taliban fighters are in the base now, but it's like the last step. Somebody's got to clear through and eliminate those threats and secure the base. So come up with another hasty plan. I send my platoon sergeant with the squad to the right, one of my squad leaders up the middle, and me to the left with another squad. And we just kind of are pushing up on line through this mess of little wood buildings. And it's just like incredibly like close quarters combat.
Yeah.
Like this is nasty stuff. We're like, you're just like swinging your rifle around corners, not knowing what you're going to see, if it's going to be, your buddy who's clearing too, or if it's going to be a Taliban fighter with his gun up, and just super, super intense. And finally, that's progressing well though. And then we get close to the breach point, which is our end goal, that hole in our perimeter. And one of the Taliban fighters climbs up into the elevated cement guard post right near the blast site. He kills the Afghan security guard and takes his 240 machine gun and turns it around on us inside the base. Wow. So he's in this elevated, reinforced fighting position, shooting down on us from about 30 meters away. He's like right on top of us. So this is like as bad as it gets. And me and the group I'm with, we go diving out of the way. Thankfully, nobody gets hit in the first couple strings of gunfire. So we're turning fire, trying to get this guy, but he's in this cement bunker and we can't get him. And right about then, this is going on for like a couple of minutes, and we're just like, man, what do we do? We're like stuck here. This guy's like ripping on us with a machine gun.
Yeah, this is not good.
Yeah. My boss, eventually, my company commander, Captain Batty, comes running up and throws me this giant bazooka looking thing. I'd never seen it before. I go, what the heck is this? And he goes, I have no idea, but it might help.
But it looks cool, so try it out.
Yeah. I go, oh my gosh. Like, again, I'm a 22-year-old lieutenant. I'm the last person on earth who's going to know what to do with this thing. So I like do what any good lieutenant does. And I find one of my NCOs.
Of course.
I say, hey man,
Smart
do you
man.
know what, do you know what this thing is? And he goes, I have no idea, but I think I can figure it out. Sergeant Cleveland, one of my team leaders. And he, tinkers with it for a couple seconds. He goes, I think I'm ready to let this thing rip. And I go, send it. So he leans out into this alleyway and, exposes himself to that machine gun fire and shoots this, what I ended up finding out was a light anti-tank weapon, a law. It looked similar to an AT-4, but a little different. So he leans out and boom, lets it rip. And right at that exact moment, all of us get blown up.
Really? And you were thinking that thing just went off. It just went off in our face.
I kind of come to and I'm like super confused, like ears are ringing and I can't hear anything and there's dust everywhere, people yelling. I'm like wondering to myself, what the hell was that? And I think, oh my God, he didn't actually know how to shoot this thing. Did this idiot shoot it backwards into the ground behind him?
Blow us up. Right.
I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I'm gonna kill this kid. But that wasn't what happened. It was a perfect shot. He nailed the guy, nailed that guard post and took out that guy with the machine gun. Thank God. So that really quieted things down.
Wow. One shot, never having fired the light anti-tank weapon before. And he hits it with one shot. Impressive.
It was beautiful.
But you guys are all blown up. And what happened to you?
Well, it turns out that, there were fighters inside the base. There were Taliban fighters also outside the base who were shooting in. And one of those guys outside the base, I think, probably heard me yelling orders to the guys around me and was like, had a hand grenade. So he pulls the pin. He, does a, Dr. J hook shot and lands it right in between all of us. So the timing just happened to be when when Sergeant Cleveland was shooting that rocket that the grenade went off. So I still didn't really fully know that at the time, but I'm looking around. I look to the guy to my left and I grab him and I say, hey man, you're hit. Like, look, you're bleeding. He's like, oh, this like, oh no. I grab the guy to my right and I say, hey man, like you're hit too. And he was like super out of it. He goes, oh yeah, well, F you, you're hit.
You guys are making fun of each other for getting blown up by a hand grenade. This is awesome.
Yeah. And I go, what? Because when the blast went off, it felt like doing a belly flop in a swimming pool, right? Like the just concussion blast wave just hit me all at once. But turns out I'd gotten shrapnel in my upper left leg too. And, I still didn't feel it, but I look down, I see this blood stain in my, real high upper left leg. And I'm like, oh man, like how bad is this? And then the blood stain grows like in a matter of seconds from the size of like a quarter to like a dinner plate to like the blood's running down, dripping off of my knee, like almost immediately. So I'm freaking out. I'm like, this is really not good.
Yeah.
So after we took out that guy in the guard tower, things had quieted down. That was sort of like the last, area that we needed to clear. So like I quickly grabbed one of my squad leaders. I'm like, hey man, I got to go get checked out, but just make sure that you guys, keep this base secure, clear back through all the buildings, and I'll catch up with you hopefully, but I got to go get worked on. So get, drugged basically to the aid station. And what I'm literally thinking about is that scene in Black Hawk Down where that Ranger gets hit in the femoral artery.
Yeah.
And they're fighting to try to clamp it and stop the bleeding. And he bleeds out. And I'm like, where I got hit, I know I'm like big trouble if that hit my femoral artery. And there's so much blood. And, I'm thinking like, man, like, is this it? Is this the end of me?
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask, I know that you've said before that most of that movie was pretty like true to real life, or at least they did a good job of trying to make it. So was that a real scene?
Yeah, that really happened. The guy's name is Jamie Smith. We kept him alive for a long time by flying in bullets and blood. Bullets for all of his buddies to keep the fight going around him, and blood to try to keep him alive. But eventually it got to the point where he was losing so much that we got the call over the radio, like, if we don't get an aircraft in here immediately, he's going to die. And our big boss, you understand this as a leader in combat. Our big boss had this gut-wrenching decision. If I fly a helicopter in there, that helicopter is going to get shot down. I'll have another downed helicopter. If I don't fly him in here, he's going to die. And we got a call on the radio about 30 minutes later saying that's it, he bled out, which just devastated all of us because everybody was trying to get to him and get him back to the surgeon. But yeah, that event really happened. And man, I just want to say, you sent me this photo. We got to talk about this photo. So most people are listening to this and they don't get a chance to see the photo. But if you're watching this, we're going to throw the photo up on the screen. You sent me a photo. It looks like one of those. You're going to tell your children and your grandchildren stories about this photo. So describe the photo for everybody who's driving and listening to this episode right now.
Yeah. So that photo was taken, shortly after I'd gotten wounded. I got taken to the aid station and got worked on, so the medics are freaked out about the same thing I'm freaked out about. Is the femoral artery intact? Turns out that, just by the grace of God, that shrapnel missed my femoral artery by less than an inch. So they were able to, control the bleeding without doing anything too crazy. And, so I'm super relieved. But right about then, I hear this guy screaming and yelling who they're bringing in to the aid station. And he's saying, "Don't let him send me home, doc. Don't let him send me home. Like, I got to stay." And I'm thinking, what the heck is this about? And it was my platoon sergeant, Josh Ross.
Yeah. So for everybody who doesn't understand the military, this is the number 1 and number 2 guy in the unit that just got themselves blown up now or shot up.
Yeah. So I'm like, "Josh, what the heck, man?" And I'm like, "Are you good?" And the medics check him out and they're like, "I think he's going to be okay." And I'm like, "Okay." So he's as relieved as I was when they told me I was going to be okay. So he kind of jumps up and hobbles over to me. He goes, "Sir, we got to get a picture." I was like, "Okay." So we grab each other and, we're holding each other. We're all, bloodied up. He got shrapnel in his legs too, a few more pieces than I did, so, we're looking pretty banged up and bloodied, but you couldn't tell by our faces, right? Because we just got the best news ever. We're like,
you're elated that you're both going to survive, literally, that you both are going to live to see another day is basically what the picture looks like. But you're pretty bloodied for anybody who's watching it or looking at the picture right now.
So it doesn't seem to line up. You're like, this terrible thing just happened to you, but you're incredibly happy. It's like you're celebrating. It's like, it's kind of crazy, but it was what it was at the time. It just made sense and it was real. So
that's the full range of emotion that warriors go through in a battle or immediately after the battle's over with. I totally understand the picture, but for people that are looking at it, they're like, "Well, I don't get it." Bloodied, but smiles on their faces.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just the craziest day ever. I mean, there's so many more stories that we could get into, but, following that, there ended up being 16 Americans wounded that day on our base. And they burned down over half the base. And we're really close to overrunning it. But thankfully my platoon performed really well. My guys just did an awesome job, before and after I got, wounded and it was a lot better than it could have been.
You guys put up a good fight. After it was over with, you were recognized for bravery, as you should have been, and received the Bronze Star for that fight. Is that correct?
At the end of the deployment, I did.
Yeah. So I want to point out to people, at this point, you have served in the military. You've had a chance to graduate from a very prestigious school, the Military Academy in West Point. You've now gone to combat. You have led your men well through a battle. And most people would say, "All right, I've done what the country's asked me to do. I'm good." But you decide to stick around. And in fact, not only did you stick around the military, but you took it up a notch. So what prompted you to decide to go consider special forces and trying out for special operations? What was the thought process that caused you to do that next?
Yeah, I mean, so I was wrestling with a lot of stuff when I got back from that deployment, and one of them was like, I had this like urge to like prove to myself that I could still do it. Like I still had it, even after getting wounded, and thank God I made what I thought was a full recovery. But I was like, I feel like I need to give it a few more years and try to deploy, again, just to show myself that I'm still good to go. So
Really?
I didn't want to necessarily stay on the infantry track. I had friends who were going the special ops track, and I wasn't even positive if I want to stay in the military. But I was like, I'll go to selection. If I get picked up, then great. Then it's just a sign from God that this is meant to be. And if I don't get selected, then it's time for me to find something outside the military. So go to selection. Thankfully that goes well, at least well enough, and get picked up. So then move to Fort Bragg, North Carolina for 2 years of the Special Forces qualification course, and then moved down to Florida after that for my detachment commander time at 7th Special Forces Group.
Yeah, and you led Special Forces teams kind of around the world. Can you give everybody a very short summary of where you took Special Forces teams when you were leading them?
Yeah, most of 7th Group's activity is down in Latin America, so Central and South America, and deployed 2 times down to Colombia, actually, where we did, different counter narcotics related missions. And at the time, Venezuela was just kind of starting to really destabilize and implode. And there was all kinds of, issues coming across the border, people, weapons, drugs, like you name it, coming from Venezuela through Colombia to the U.S. So working with the Colombian military and police to increase awareness of that situation and decrease the flow of threats towards the U.S. was some of the more interesting work I think that we were doing, and it was just a ton of fun.
Yeah. It's a big transition to go from the regular side of the military into special operations. I heard you say it, makes total sense to me, but I want to make sure that the listeners picked up on this. You went into Special Forces, which is a specific part of special operations in the U.S. military, often referred to as the Army's Green Berets. Okay, right. So let's have some fun together, man. You and I talked about this just before the episode started. I do this segment. It's called the High Five. And in the High Five segment, I try to go back and forth with whoever the guest is and just have a little fun. And because of our collective experience, mine and yours, in the military and in special operations, I have had countless people. I can't even begin to come up with the number of people that when I told them I did special operations, they said, "Oh, you're a Green Beret." And I'm like, well, the Green Berets do special operations, but the Green Berets are actually special forces. It's a little bit different. And then they look at me with this crazy look on their face like, I don't understand. What's the difference between special forces and special operations? So can we have a little bit of fun here? You okay with that, Colby?
Yeah, let's do it.
I know you've had people do the same thing to you that they've done to me. They hear special forces, they think special operations, or they automatically assume all special ops are special forces. So in your mind, top 5 things that are kind of distinguished special forces from the rest of special operations. That's what I want us to talk about for a couple of minutes. And for me, one of the number one, well, look, let's just talk about the easiest and the most obvious answer to question number 1. What distinguishes special forces from the rest? It's the color of their beret, man. Everybody knows them as, ever since John Wayne played in the movie Green Berets, everybody knows the color of that beret.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about
the branding side of it's a little confusing because we're special forces, we're Green Berets. It's all kind of the same thing. But the Green Beret definitely helps you stick out, makes it resonate in people's heads.
So for you, I know that people had to talk to you about that Green Beret while you were in the military, right? Tell me that they had conversations with you about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I remember before I was a Green Beret, seeing those guys walking around base and thinking they were,
pretty impressive, right?
Man,
Yeah.
Then, you, like anything, you join and you realize they're just people, talented and dedicated and good at their job, but, still just normal people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so number 2 on my list, what we're trying to do is just explain the differences between Green Berets as a group and the larger special operations forces in the military. So for me, number 2 on the list is really easy. It's the mission. The mission of Green Berets is very different from the mission that other special forces or special operations forces have. What about you? What would you say is another key difference between the 2?
One of them, I hadn't thought about this too much, but is Green Berets, they think that they look good in suits. I think that's kind of unique.
I like the fact that you said they think they look good, but maybe they do, maybe they don't.
We all thought we looked good in our suits because we do a lot of work in embassies and we're kind of, interagency type of relations type of settings. So everybody, you have to deploy with suits.
Yeah, where you take the uniform off and you kind of try to blend in with the rest of the population. Yeah.
I remember us, taking selfies, being like, man, we look good. And in hindsight, looking at some of those pictures, now that I'm in the civilian world, now I've, had to actually learn a little bit about suits. I realized, man, half of us look like garbage.
Yeah.
But yeah, we all think that we look really, really good in the suit.
Okay, you just moved towards number 3 for me, because number 3 on the list for me is the beard. When you guys go overseas and you start growing all the beard and the long hair, it's pretty epic. And not all special operations do that. So what about the beard and the long hair? Come on, man.
Yeah, I think it was also tied to like Call of Duty. We all of us thought that was super sexy. It was like the typical operator look, with like the tattoos and the beard and long hair. So we wanted to do it everywhere we went, whether, that was helped you blend into the culture or not. Like in Colombia, for example, almost nobody has a beard, but our guys were just like, man, I need to be able to grow a beard. I want to grow a big beard. And we were like, that doesn't make any sense. The whole goal is to
Why would you be the only dude down here with a big beard?
Yeah, it's like, this isn't Afghanistan, where everybody has a beard. But yeah, everybody wanted to have that look. So.
All right. So for folks that don't understand the difference, number 4 is the paycheck. Let's just be honest. When you're overseas, you get a little bit of extra money as a special forces guy that sometimes the other special operations forces don't get, because you're on these special orders, right?
That's right. And yeah, it's shocking what people will go through for just a little bump in pay, whether that's getting married to somebody they know they shouldn't be married to, or going special forces. It's a good motivator.
Yeah. Number 5, and here for me is kind of the pinnacle of the list. So in this high 5, what distinguishes the Green Berets from the rest of special operations? Well, ultimately, it's the mission of fighting with foreigners, teaching foreigners how to fight to defend their country well. And honestly, nobody on the planet does it better than special forces. So can you talk about that quintessential special forces mission of training other forces?
Yeah, I mean, we operate by, with, and through partner in indigenous forces. That's what we're really good at. So if, that was kind of a humbling thing for me, as I got to work with other special operations groups. If you want to send in a group of Americans by themselves to get a job done, there's units that probably do that better than we did it. Right. Like, I mean, the Rangers, the SEALs, that's what they do so well. But, bar none, nobody can work with partner forces to enable them to be successful like Green Berets can. And it's just such agree. A multiplier. It's so important.
Nobody on the planet can do what the Green Berets can do when it comes to training with and teaching those foreign indigenous forces how to fight to defend their own country, or how to do their thing in their own backyard. Nobody can do that like the Green Berets can.
I'll add one thing that all special operations forces have in common is that we're sick of being asked if we're Navy SEALs too.
You and me both. Yes, absolutely.
Ever since the Bin Laden thing, it's like they've won the branding war, right? Yeah. So everyone says, "Oh, are you like a SEAL?" It's like, oh, I'm so sick of hearing that. Nothing against SEALs, right? But
right.
That gets old.
Okay, so you spent about 9 years in the Army. At some point, everyone decides, hey, it's time to call my military career. It's time to end my military career. Some guys and gals will do it after just a few months or a few years. Some will do it for decades. Why, after 9 years, did you say, all right, it's time for me to move on to something different?
Yeah, for me, it wasn't an easy choice because I loved what I had done in the Army. Like, I loved it.
So did I. And it was a hard decision for me too, man.
Yeah. I mean, I'd honestly, at that point, I'd spent a lot of time away. I'd been deployed quite a bit, and gone for training and moved a lot. Again, I married my wife, Sarah, she was my high school sweetheart. We got married right after West Point. So she'd lived with me in Georgia and Colorado and North Carolina and Florida, like moved her all over the place. We were thinking about having kids at that point. So, we just together decided that it was time to pivot and move on to the next chapter God had for us.
Yeah. And I want to point out, you went from one of the most difficult and prestigious schools in America, West Point, to another one of the most difficult and prestigious schools in America, MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where you got an MBA. Why did you look at MIT, the Sloan Business School, for your MBA?
Yeah, I remember as a kid being in Boston with my dad. I think he was scouting the Red Sox, and we drove by MIT, and I remember him telling me, I was probably 9 years old at the time. He goes, "That's MIT. Only geniuses go there."
Yeah, that's right. I still feel like only geniuses get into MIT. Yeah.
Well, our country is amazing for so many reasons, but one of them is how we take care of our veterans, and that applies to higher education too. So veterans, apply to as like a protected class to all of these programs. So really, you're competing with other veterans and not the general population to get some of the few slots that are set aside at each of these great schools. So like I still had to like work hard and do well on my scores on the standardized tests and stuff to get in. But
yeah, ultimately,
I was able to get into MIT despite not being a genius, not even close, because I served in the military, and that's you talk about like being thankful for some of these trials and setbacks you go through, like getting blown up in Afghanistan isn't something I would wish on anybody, but it gave me a story that I could look back on. I can share that story, and I was able to share it in my admissions essays and interviews and stuff, and it's was compelling enough to help get me into MIT. So, among many reasons, that's one reason I'm very thankful.
I'm just going to tell you, Colby, I still feel like you're a little bit of a genius, because to me, you don't go to MIT, you don't even get in, let alone make it through without having a little bit of genius in you. And I think that probably came from your mom's side of the family, right?
For sure. For sure, not my dad's.
Yeah.
No offense, Dad.
Hey, as we get ready to wrap up, tell everybody what you're doing now in Houston, Texas with the Home Run Dugout. Describe this startup that you're part of.
Yeah. So my best friend from high school, his name's Tyler Bambrick. We went to West Point together, actually, served as infantry officers together. And then he got out before I did, went to business school. And while he was there, met a guy named Nick, and he had this idea that, like, we love what Topgolf does, but why can't we do that for baseball? Like, we were baseball fans, we're like, this could be a ton of fun. So they started working on that. And then, when I was in business school, I was looking at what I wanted to do. And at that point they started to have some traction and raise some money, and were looking to grow and needed, to grow the leadership team. So it just really connected a lot of the things that I was looking for, from the baseball connection to, being able to apply the things I learned in the military about leadership and a leadership position in the company. And the entrepreneurial route really resonated with me, because I feel like, it had more of what I liked about the Army and less of what I didn't like about the Army. So there's like less of the bureaucracy.
All of the good stuff, but not the bad stuff. Nice.
Yeah. Less of the bureaucracy and the regulations and stuff like that, but more of the, like, you with a small, tight-knit group of people who you really care about doing interesting things every day. That really, attracted me to it. Yeah. And, we're going to have a chance, if this goes well, to employ a lot of people. And that's something that's really, still gets me fired up, is providing good jobs for Americans.
Yeah.
So.
Well, hopefully it won't be long before there is a home run dugout in every little city in America. And you're pretty much the next Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, right?
Well, that's great. I'll go along with that. Now let's do it.
Hey, man, I just want to say thank you for sharing this incredible story. Thanks for being willing to, continue with your military education at West Point, going off to Afghanistan and serving the country. And even after getting blown up, and you could have just, sailed off into the horizon with those, all of those combat stories, you stuck around and you did some pretty amazing things for our country. And I just want to say thanks, man. Thanks for all that you've done for us.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate you. And it's great to be on. And thank you for this podcast. I found it really inspiring, and hopefully something I shared today helps somebody out. So,
yeah, I'm sure it will. If people want to know more about you, how can they find out more about you, Colby?
Let's see. I mean, I'm on, I got rid of most of my social media. I'm on LinkedIn under Colby Smith, Colby.
Okay.
You can send me an email. My email is Colby@homerundugout. That's, all one word.
Just like it sounds. Yeah.
homerundugout.com. Yeah. And I'd love to talk to anybody who's interested in learning more, just wants to connect.
We'll put the links to this, definitely your link to LinkedIn in the notes to this show today. But man, again, thanks for being with us, and thanks for being one of those unbeatable guys and gals that have served the country.
Thank you, Jeff. It's great.
All right, man. Hey, Colby can't control getting his shoulder blown out in his first semester of school. He didn't have any control over getting blown up by a hand grenade on his first combat deployment. And you can't control your circumstances either, nor can I. But what you and I can learn from Colby Smith is circumstances are out of your control, but how you respond to them and the attitude that you bring after things have gone wrong makes all the difference in the world. Thanks for joining me for this episode. And by the way, if you found us on social media, I'd love for you to follow us. You can find us basically anywhere by just going to @Unbeatable Podcast and following along there. Or if you've discovered this podcast and you've been listening for a couple of episodes on your favorite podcast platform, why don't you rate us? Tell everybody else that's listening to podcasts how amazing Unbeatable is. And by the way, I want to help you if you're facing some challenges right now and you're really not sure how to handle it or what to do next. I got a free resource for you. It's called the Unbeatable Army Survival Guide. And all you got to do to get it, it's a PDF, totally free. All you got to do is just simply go to unbeatablearmy.com. Thanks for listening to this episode. I'll see you right back here next week.